Somewhere between your first heartbreak and every relationship that followed, something quietly changed, and the weird part is, most people never stop to ask why. That first love didn't just end a relationship. It ended a version of you that had never been hurt before. Imagine you're 17, or maybe 22, and for the first time in your life, someone has your whole heart, not a piece of it, not the careful, guarded version you'd hand out later, but all of it completely unprotected. You didn't know yet that you were supposed to keep something back. Here's what nobody tells you at the start. Why does breaking up with your first love feel like the actual world is ending? While every breakup after that stings, sure, but somehow you just survive it. Is it them? Is it you? Or is it something far more psychological happening underneath the surface? Here's the mechanic. Nobody talks about your brain during a first love is literally under construction. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for emotional regulation and long-term perspective, isn't even fully developed until your mid-20s, which means your first love gets processed with zero emotional filters and maximum intensity. Think of it like recording music in a brand new studio with no soundproofing, every frequency hits at full volume, every emotion reverberates off every wall, and the recording that gets made is raw, loud, and permanently etched. Every love after that gets recorded in a studio with better acoustics, better tools, and a producer who's finally learned to turn down the gain. And let's be real, your first love wasn't just a person. They were your entire social identity, your weekend plans, your sense of what the future looked like, and probably your texting style too. Losing them wasn't just losing a partner, it was losing a whole constructed reality you'd built your personality around. So why didn't the second or third breakup haul you out the same way? Because by then, you had quietly, almost invisibly, started doing something your younger self never did. You held a small piece of yourself back, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. You learned, without anyone teaching you, that you are a separate entity from the person you love. There's actually a psychological term for what your first love creates. It's called a relational schema, essentially a mental blueprint for what love feels and looks like based on your earliest romantic experience. Every relationship after that gets unconsciously compared to that original blueprint, which is why the first one breaking apart doesn't just feel like loss, it feels like the blueprint itself is on fire. Cue the romantic comedies and the dramatic rain-soaked walks, but underneath all the cinematic grief is something far more neurological and far less poetic. Your brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, and norepinephrine during first love at levels that rival certain addictions. Which means when it ends, you're not just sad, you are chemically withdrawing. There's something darkly funny about that, isn't there? The fact that your body treats your first breakup like you've just been cut off from a substance it was physiologically dependent on. Meanwhile, your friends are handing you ice cream and telling you to just move on, completely unaware that you are basically in withdrawal. By the time you hit your second or third relationship, your brain has a memory of surviving, and that memory is more powerful than people give it credit for. You don't walk in naive anymore. You walk in knowing that love can end, that you can live through it, and that your identity will still be intact on the other side. That resilience isn't numbness. And this is the part that often gets misread. People assume that crying less over later breakups means you loved less, but that's not it at all. It means you loved more wisely, more consciously, with a self that was no longer entirely defined by the relationship. There's also the pure, almost cruel irony of timing your first love happens during a period of maximum emotional sensitivity and minimum coping experience. It's like being handed the most complex emotional situation of your life on the same day you show up to work with absolutely no training and no idea where anything is. Later relationships end with the version of you that has already rebuilt yourself once, maybe twice, and knows somewhere deep and wordless that you will do it again. That knowledge doesn't make the pain disappear, but it fundamentally changes the nature of the pain. The way knowing a storm will pass changes how you sit through the rain. Some people confuse this evolution with becoming cold or emotionally unavailable, and that's worth pushing back on directly. The ability to survive loss with more grace isn't emotional distance, it's emotional maturity. And there's a profound difference between the two that most people only understand in hindsight. The first love also carries the weight of all your firsts. First real vulnerability, first real jealousy, first time love was intertwined with your sense of self-worth. Every relationship after that gets to be evaluated on its own terms, rather than serving as the foundational definition of what love even is. And here's the contradiction that sits at the center of all of this. The very thing that makes first love so devastating to lose is also what makes it so formative to have had. It cracked you open in a way that made every subsequent connection richer, stranger, more nuanced, and ultimately more real. So the grief you felt wasn't a sign that your first love was the greatest love you'd ever have. It was a sign that you were fully, completely, recklessly human for perhaps the very first time. And every relationship you've walked into since has carried some quiet inheritance from that original, unguarded version of you. The fact that later breakups didn't break you the same way isn't a loss of feeling, it's the proof that you grew. You became someone capable of loving without dissolving, of grieving without disappearing, which is actually one of the most significant things a person can quietly learn to do. So the next time someone tells you their first heartbreak still hurts in a way no other has, don't hand them a tissue and tell them they'll get over it. Understand that they are mourning something no one gets back, the last version of themselves that loved without knowing the cost, and that's worth sitting with for a while.